we're really excited to be partnering with the Migala Report for this webinar series. Dan Migala is one of our great instructors. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan for today's interview.
Great. Thank you, Beth, for the kind introduction. For those of you guys that are in Chicago, Chuck and I are sitting here at the winter meetings in warm, sunny Orlando. I couldn't ask for a better setting. We're actually in one of the suites that a lot of the deals you'll hear about from the baseball winter meetings are going down. So welcome, and thank you to Northwestern for putting this on, and welcome Chuck Greenberg. For those of you that aren't familiar with Chuck, I think especially for students, it's quite a remarkable story to find an executive that's had his imprint on the National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, and really how I got to know Chuck through his ownership of multiple minor league teams. So welcome here to the program, Chuck.
Good to be here, Dan. Thank you.
Great. So obviously we got the students sitting in on this, and would love to just kind of get a little bit insights to your story. I mean, obviously, what you've accomplished and the diversity of it. Looking back, tell us how you got started.
Well, first of all of you who are taking courses to try to get into the industry, you're already miles ahead of where I was at the same point. I went undergrad at Tufts University outside of Boston, went to law school at Michigan. Sorry about whatever has happened in football over recent years, but went to law school at Michigan, got out of there in '85, and had a real desire to get involved in the sports industry, but had absolutely no plan or conception of how I was going to do that. Began practicing law at a small law firm in Pittsburgh. And back then, you used to go on a rotation for a couple of years and work in different areas of the law before settling on a specialty. And after I've been practicing for about a year and a half, close to 2 years, in 1987, I heard that Mario Lemieux, who was at the beginning of what would become a legendary hockey career in Pittsburgh, was having some problems with the construction of his home. At the time, I was doing some real estate work, and I told the head of our law firm, who happened to be good friends with Mario's new agent, that I thought I could help him out. First, I was rebuffed, but I persisted and ultimately was introduced to Mario, helped him out with the construction of his home. We hit it off personally and professionally, and I ended up becoming his lawyer as well as we've been very close friends now for a long time. And really, I can trace back almost everything that's happened in the sports industry over the ensuing 26 years or so to that opportunity to meet Mario, because from that relationship, I began to meet a lot of other people in the sports industry, players, executives, and eventually owners. And I always read quite a bit about the business of sports. I could talk a pretty good game, and before you know it, some of these folks were asking me to help them in their legal affairs in the sports industry. And it morphed into ultimately representing owners in the operation of their teams, prospective owners in the purchase of teams, and so I got deeply ingrained in the sports industry through my legal career initially. Then the Penguins filed for bankruptcy in the late 90s, and I helped lead a team that helped Mario make history by coming back to purchase the Penguins out of bankruptcy. It was an extremely convoluted deal. It was at the time probably the most complex one that had come together. Mario was nothing but an unsecured creditor in bankruptcy, which is not a lot of standing. But through his persona and leadership and will and the hard work that a lot of us had, we were able to utilize the system to help him purchase the team. And in that process, we had no capital, we had no management team, we had no experience. Our bankruptcy lawyer liked to say we were virtual buyers. So from that process, I had a chance to help put the business plan together, the projections, put the partnership together, assist Mario in raising the capital, and then ultimately hire other members of the deal team and ultimately the front office, who've been able to take that franchise, led by Mario and his primary partner Ron Burkle, and what they and the management team there have done is quite remarkable. Ultimately helped them with the construction of with getting a deal done to build their new arena, and really proud to have been associated with that franchise. After I did the Penguin deal, then I became one of the go-to guys in the commissioner's office of the NHL for troubled franchises to call to see if I could be of some assistance. And it was from that I had my first opportunity to move into baseball, when I got a phone call from the original owners of the Pirates AA affiliate in Altoona, Pennsylvania, who offered me a chance to buy their franchise to settle some differences they had with each other. So I bought the Altoona Curve in 2002, bought the Myrtle Beach Pelicans in 2006, bought the then New Jersey Cardinals after the 2005 season, relocated them to State College to play in a new ballpark that I had partnered with Penn State to get built. It was a very innovative, groundbreaking project. It was the first LEED certified, environmentally certified ballpark anywhere in the industry, and sold Altoona at the end of '08. Continued on Myrtle Beach and State College. When I sold Altoona, I told my wife I'd kind of kick back there for a little while, and 4 months later, I found myself in a conference room in Dallas, Texas, looking at the Texas Rangers, and after what was quite an extraordinary year-and-a-half process with more ups and downs than a Hollywood screenwriter would dare dream of, our group ended up outbidding Mark Cuban in a shootout back in, of all places, bankruptcy court, and we took over the Rangers, consummated what was at the time the largest single-team media deal in the history of professional sports, and one that really lifted the lid on some of the media opportunities and the true value of media rights in baseball, and dramatically increased franchise values. In 2011, sold my interest back to my partners, and continued on Myrtle Beach and State College, and looking for opportunities every day. So it's been a really interesting ride over the last 25 or 26 years, one that I never could have imagined when I was coming out of school. But it's been a lot of fun, met some great people along the way, and picked up a couple stories too, Dan.
Yeah, well, one of the things, obviously, students at Northwestern, you mentioned, the fact that, they're pursuing the degree, they're getting involved in sports management when you were first starting out, tracing it back to that first relationship, right? I mean, would you ever in your wildest dreams, think about what you just said, of everything you've accomplished, the 24-year-old version, of yourself. You probably couldn't imagine that. Talk about the importance of, the networking and the assertiveness and kind of having that vision, because, so much of even what the winter meetings here are about right now is just the relationships and obviously the community people they're associated with Northwestern too. But I think that's an important, being opportunistic early on to all those opportunities.
Yeah, my favorite quote that I ever heard in the context of business opportunities is that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And I really believe in that. Before I had any involvement in the sports industry, I did quite a bit of reading about the business of sports and tried to keep myself up on it. And so when I did have the opportunity to start to meet people in the sports industry, I was able to carry on and convey a sense of knowledge that probably went beyond my actual experiences. I was prepared for it. So it was lucky to have met Mario, but by having prepared for opportunities like that, I was able to take advantage of it. But along with that, you've got to be passionate. Most of all, you've got to be sincere. If you just view everything as an opportunity to meet someone so you can work them to get to somebody else, people figure that out in a hurry, and you kind of get cast aside. But if you genuinely like people and you enjoy meeting people and you're passionate about the things that interest you, it can lead to all sorts of great opportunities, and I think I'm a good example of that.
Yeah, what advice do you have, obviously now as somebody that everybody in the industry would want to work for, with the teams that you're involved with, how do you show some of that, if you're, a Northwestern student or, one of the job seekers here at the winter meetings? I mean, what are the things that you look for in those job candidates?
Well, I think having a maturity and a wisdom about the sacrifices you have to make is important. I like to say all the time that there are a lot of people who are coming out of school who want a job in sports. There are far fewer who want to work in sports. It's very alluring to say I work for such and such a club. It's great to have that business card with a really cool logo on it. It's fun to be able to talk about the team as though you have some role in who the players are. The reality is most of the work that goes on in sports is not glamorous at all. The hours are long. The pay, particularly initially, is not great. And most of what you do, there's not an immediate psychic payoff to it. So to be realistic about that, to be willing to persevere, to be willing to grind in the hopes, not the knowledge, but the hope that will lead to bigger and better opportunities down the future is important. And these days, one of the things that we see is that there are so many people that are looking for instant gratification, and understandably so. But in order to get ahead, you do have to be willing to pay your dues. You do have to put the time in. You do need to work and take some risk, not being certain that it's going to work out. But those who are truly passionate about it, those who believe in it, those who are willing to make those kinds of sacrifices and are willing to be persistent yet patient, those are the ones who invariably seem to do quite well.
Yeah, I was talking to Sam Burnaby, who's the CEO of the Iowa Cubs, And he was saying the best way to describe it was be aggressively patient, in that, because it does take time. And I think it's a good reminder. So when you graduated, the time that you were working, as a lawyer to meeting Mario, what was the time differential, for that?
It was actually less than 2 years, but who would have known? I got out of law school in the spring of '05. I started practicing the fall of '05. We met in '07. So in many ways that was very, very quick. But a week before we met, I would have had no reason to think that we would have. So I was about 2 years out of law school and was the closest I was to being in the sports industry was reading the sports section in the morning. So you can go from seeming to have no path to suddenly having an opportunity in the blink of an eye when you least expect it. And that's why it's important to be persistent and to get out there. Someone said a long time ago, a big part of life is just showing up. And there's innumerable instances where I would go to events, or I would go to functions, or I'd hang out and talk to people, and I had no ulterior motive. But I thought, if I just put myself in the right position often enough, there's a good chance that good things will come of it. And eventually they did.
Yeah, one of the things I really admire about Chuck, great compliment from some of the GMs that he has, and the qualities they admire him, is just being a good listener. And I think no matter what stage of your career, the ability to listen, and understand is a quality that will serve you well. We actually have our first question, and a reminder to the audience to post your questions. So Chuck, this one actually comes from Brad. What successful tactics have you seen or advice would you give to a less popular sport trying to reach sales goal in a crowded marketplace?
That's a great question. The sports that I've been primarily involved in, fortunately, have been mainstream sports. A lot of work in hockey, and of course, quite a bit in baseball as well. Well, first of all, I've only been able to succeed where I've been really passionate about the sport that was involved. I've had some interesting business opportunities that I passed on because it was in sports that just didn't turn me on personally. So I guess in that regard, I'm not much of a mercenary, because I have to really believe personally in what I'm doing. But if it's a sport that's less mainstream, if you're passionate about it personally and you can convey that, and you can provide a solution that the people that you're speaking with are looking for, whether it's an opportunity to entertain their clients or family, if it's a family-oriented sport, if you just think about what they're looking for, that's important. Dan, you mentioned about listening, and I think whether you're trying to sell or negotiate, the most important thing is think about the needs and the wishes and the desires of the people you're dealing with far more than your own. You don't have to focus on what you want. You already know that. But if you spend your time trying to understand what the other person is looking for, then you have a chance to connect. And that's particularly true in negotiating. I think most negotiations that fail are because the parties get so wrapped up in what they want that they just don't hear each other. And most negotiations are not a zero-sum game. Usually there's a lot of common ground, but sometimes parties inartfully just miss that common ground, and that's when things get difficult. So if you can find the things in a negotiation that you agree on, and you shrink the sphere of the areas where you possibly disagree, you can have success. And in the same vein, when you're selling, look for those areas where try to figure out what it is the other person wants, whether they are able to identify it or not, and then sell to that.
I think also too, that's great advice, not only in a negotiation, but even searching for your job. If you could put yourself in the position of the hiring manager and address their needs more than your own. So if I'm a student at Northwestern and I'm applying for a job with one of your minor league baseball teams, or any team, how can I customize my time and talents and experiences to solve a problem that you have? Wouldn't that be
Absolutely.
a great situation to think about?
No doubt. I think in general, in all phases of life, if you think of yourself as a problem solver, you're of great value to someone, starting with yourself. I think a lot of people, and I say this as a reformed lawyer, because a lot of lawyers and a lot of people in general, they kind of pride themselves on being able to identify everything that's wrong or everything that could go wrong. That's fine, but that's like being able to take something apart and not be able to put it back together. If you can focus on problem solving, which starts with being able to identify the problem, then you're of much greater value, and you can be a lot more productive in a way that not only benefits everyone else you're dealing with, but also for yourself.
How do you show that, obviously you got a resume and everybody's got their LinkedIn profile and everything, in terms of their skill set, but that's like beyond the tactical stuff, right? So they've got an MSA degree, great university, all of these elements, but the ability to, I'm a problem solver. I mean, what do you look for in somebody actually showing that to you?
Actually, just something as simple as saying it is very helpful, because we don't hear that all that often. I mean, to come from a great school like Northwestern and a terrific program like this, I think one of the things we better emphasize is, I mean, obviously everyone in this program is very driven. You're obviously all very smart, but again, to emphasize that you're willing to make sacrifices, that you're willing to take the long view of things, and then to speak about passion, to speak about the desire to problem solve. I think those things generally really resonate, and I think they'll position you well.
Yeah, so sacrifices, right? I mean, everybody's got some stories of sacrifices that they've made in obstacles, and you look back on your career. I mean, what were some of those barriers that you went through, or obstacles along the way? I mean, we did a nice job of summarizing all that success, but there had to be countless bumps in the road, of kind of just like an athlete, right? Sometimes you want to quit or give up, but how'd you get through it, and maybe give some context to some of those experiences that you faced?
Well, there was one I was working on. It was a pretty high-profile sports deal when I was still working as a lawyer. I won't mention the one involved, but it was a situation where we were negotiating something with some public officials, and I was flanked by the owners of the club, who were very well-respected guys, and the negotiation got to sort of a contentious point, and the party with whom we were negotiating became quite angry, and for various reasons, they couldn't yell at the gentleman on my right, they couldn't yell at the gentleman on my left, but it was really easy to yell at their lawyer. So I got lit up in a way that, I mean, my skin almost melted. I got called every name imaginable. There were a lot of words that ended in R, and it was pretty ugly. It was one of those situations that it would have been very easy and very human to react, to respond, to defend. But I also knew at that moment that was the worst thing I could possibly do. So I had to fight every instinct imaginable and just wear it. Just sit there placidly and impassively, try not to show any reaction at all, and just wear it. Let the gentleman vent. And as a result, a situation that could have gotten really ugly, where things might have been said that would have made it impossible to ultimately get to success, was mitigated to some extent, and everybody cooled off. And after passage of time and a few negotiating maneuvers, we were able to get everything back on track, get the deal done. The person who yelled at me actually ended up becoming a very good friend of mine. So that was an example where sometimes you have to sort of subordinate your own reactions and what's happening with yourself. Think about the larger picture of why you're there. And that circumstance ended up coming out quite well, because I paid no regard at all to how I was feeling at the moment, or at least I was able to kind of keep that in check. Remember the purpose for which I was there, who I was serving in that instance, and think about their best interest rather than my own reactions. And it worked out well for everyone, including myself, because this gentleman ended up being a real ally on some other things that I ended up doing later. And if I had handled it differently, it would have been defensible, but foolish.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things that you don't think about sometimes, the long-term effect of your career choices too. You're thinking about that first moment, but really, you want to have 4 or 5 decades here in the business, and those relationships, an adversary early on could become an ally.
Yeah, and
later on.
Yeah, and that happens a lot, and it is difficult. Particularly the younger you are, the more each experience represents as a percentage of your life experiences, and so it can seem like a bigger deal than it is. But it is important to try as hard as you can to take the long view. Now, I'm saying that as someone who was always in an immense hurry. I mean, I ended up, I skipped a grade in school when I was the youngest guy graduating from high school and from college, and I went straight to law school, and I was working full time during my 3rd year of law school, and was the youngest partner in my firm, the youngest senior partner in my firm. So I don't want this to seem like do as I say, not as I do. But even if you're in a hurry, and even if you're trying to figure out every way to get where you want to be as soon as you can, you still need to take the long view. And sometimes that takes real restraint. I mean, in minor league baseball, one of the biggest challenges we have is to try to help our folks realize that getting what appears to be a bigger title in another franchise is not necessarily the best career move that they can make at that time. That particularly early in your career, the most important thing is to develop as deep and as broad a set of skills as possible, to learn as much as possible, so that you're not prepared for the next job, you're prepared for the job that you ultimately want to get to. And sometimes that means foregoing what appears to be a better title at another franchise to stay where you are if you're in a position where there's a better learning opportunity in the environment you currently enjoy. And when you're passing up a better title, maybe a little bit more money, that can be challenging. But the best seem to understand that, and that's why we've had a pretty good track record hanging on to the people that we care about most, and we're really proud of the things that a lot of our folks have gone on to do afterwards.
Yeah, it was interesting. Just as minor league baseball, for those when you explore your career choices, for me, even I just mentioned to a group of job seekers earlier today here at the winter meetings that my first year in sports was working in the Midwest League with the Kane County Cougars, and I went on and then worked with NFL and Major League Baseball team, and I feel like I learned more in that one season of minor league baseball just because I had my hands in so many different things that that versatility really served me well. So great point of Chuck, to get that experience, get exposure to as many things as you can. Chuck, I think we had a couple lawyers, pop up with a couple questions. I've got one from Avamon, his question is, what advice do you have to make contacts and enter into legal departments within a sports organization, or potentially even serve as an outside counsel, perhaps even as a litigator?
Great question. Generally speaking, the path into a sports franchise in the legal department is not straight out of law school. Generally speaking, they want to see some level of experience from a law firm so that you get hands-on training in a law firm environment, because most law firms do a pretty good job at training, and then move over into the front office side. So for the most part, you're better off being in a law firm first. Ideally, you want to go to a law firm that has a sports industry practice. A sports industry practice is not necessarily issues that are specific to the sports industry. Sometimes a sports industry practice really just means that they have clients who are in the sports industry, and the work you do for them is pretty traditional, but you understand how it fits into the context of the sports industry. So there are a lot of general counsels in sports franchises who were in corporate securities practice groups and law firms, and that prepared them to do a wide range of contractual work once they moved over to a sports franchise. Some have been litigators that have moved over. Generally speaking, when you have a corporate background or a labor background, you tend to be a little bit more trained and accustomed to spotting questions, and that tends to lend itself a little better when you move over onto the front office side. Litigators is different. Fewer litigators have moved over, but it's certainly not completely uncommon. Certainly there's been quite a few antitrust litigators who moved over into league offices. And when you look at league offices now, it's like lawyers alumni club. It's just full of lawyers all over the place. So for better or worse, sports franchises are heavily populated by lawyers now, both at the league office and at the local level. Generally speaking, it's after going to law firms first, and hopefully getting the kind of exposure that enables you to be a good problem spotter, and also pretty adept at identifying and asking questions so that you can do good work as general counsel.
Oh, great in-depth answer and perspective. Our next question actually is a sponsorship question, and I've had the great pleasure of working with Chuck. He's on the board of Project Brand, which is minor league baseball's great new initiative from a sponsorship perspective, aggregating all the 160 teams together. Chuck, this is a question maybe put your owner hat on. What are some current point pains, from your perspective in sports sponsorship? The process of it, of actually getting those sponsorship revenue dollars, and you're listening to your GMs, you're talking to the marketplace. What are some of the points of pain that you're seeing in the sales process?
Well, I think it varies from level to level and league to league. In minor league baseball, the biggest challenge we have is getting to decision makers at a high enough level that you can negotiate the kind of deals that we aspire to. Biggest problem we've had in minor league baseball is that we've got 160 clubs. Actually, I would say our weaknesses and our strengths are sort of related to one another. Our strengths are that we've got 160 clubs. We're in over 100 discrete markets around the country. We've got 41 million fans in attendance. We have a bigger, better footprint where our communities are located than any other sport. The vast majority of operators do an outstanding job at building their brand and marketing within their communities. The challenge has been that there hasn't been an effective collective effort to harness the collective strength of those brands. So I would say at the national level, the challenge that we've had in the past is we haven't been able to take advantage of the opportunities that our individual strengths should enable us to take full advantage of. And that's what Project Brand and the great work, Dan, that you and Mike Hand and the other folks at the NA are doing now, I think is going to correct that in a big way. At the local level, continuity is an issue, and the other is from a staffing standpoint. Most of our staffs tend to be pretty small, and in most franchises, you really only got 2 or 3 people selling sponsorships. Well, if one leaves, you're really in a hole, because in most of our communities and in most every facet of the sports industry, relationships are very important. So being able to hang on to people, being able to create opportunities for upward mobility so they want to stay, so they can continue to build and cultivate and foster relationships that can then turn into more revenue. That's one of the challenges we face, while also trying to get the decision makers who actually control the budgets, which is not always the case on the local level.
Yeah, but I mean, it's that fundamental process, whether it's the Texas Rangers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, or State College Spikes. I mean, it's the same process that you go through, right?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of having an extra zero. What you constantly look for is to find creative ways to package inventory in a way that is of value to the sponsors that you're seeking to speak with. So, it was the same in helping the Penguins, and then with my minor league baseball teams, and it was the same with the Rangers. One of the key elements to all of that, though, is no matter what the level is, you need to be selling from a strong brand. And so all the things you can do to build your brand, to establish who you are, is essential, because one of the best definitions I ever heard about a brand was from a friend of mine who does a lot of work in brand consulting, who said that a brand is how a consumer feels about their affinity for that company. I thought that was a really creative way to look at things. And, you think there are certain sports franchises, for example, that, you just feel proud to be a fan of that franchise. Steeler fans, being from Pittsburgh, Steeler fans are really proud wherever they live. They're proud to wave that flag and say they're a member of Steeler Nation. Certainly Red Sox fans, with the advent and extraordinary success of the Red Sox over the last decade plus, another good example of that. So those are strong brands, and fans are pretty proud to be a part of that tribe. So the work that franchises do at any level, from minor league to major league, to build their brand in their community, to represent themselves well, to do good deeds in the community, do all the things that have nothing to do with what happens between the white lines or whatever the playing surface happens to be during the games. Those are all things that are not only doing the right thing, but it's also the smart and the strategic thing business-wise, because they enable your sales staff to then go out and do a more effective job because they're selling from strength.
Yeah, and I did mention that question actually was from Kevin, so thank you, Kevin, for the question. Our next question actually is from Andy. Interesting question, maybe do a scouting report on yourself. Looking back, anything you would have done differently in your career path?
Oh gosh, no, and I like looking back at things to try to learn, but I don't do it to second guess, because you can end up sort of with a paralysis of analysis. But one thing that's kind of interesting is when I was in law school, my best friend growing up was the center on Penn State's first national championship football team, and he was coming out of college, and he asked me if I was interested in meeting with him and a few of his friends who were getting ready for the draft, and whether I'd be interested in speaking with them about possibly representing them as their agent. And I said to him, gosh, my best friend, friendship and loyalty are more important to me than opportunity, and I just can't believe that I could do as good a job for you as an experienced agent could. I could never live with myself if I didn't get you the best deal possible, and if I didn't get your friends the best deal possible. And I'd really feel better if you went with an established agent. So he hired an established agent. I was kind of relieved. I was happy for him. But I did wonder if I'd given him good advice 3 years later, when his agent got sentenced to jail for defrauding a bunch of his clients and stealing their money. So, it's always interesting to look back. What if I would have gone and met with him and some of his teammates who went on to have very illustrious NFL careers? But when I think about all of the great experiences that I've been able to enjoy across a wide spectrum of the sports industry and all kinds of different circumstances, and to meet a lot of really good and really interesting people, I consider myself incredibly lucky, and I wouldn't trade the experiences I've had for everything. And some of them have been challenging, and some of them have been disappointing. But they all sort of form part of the tapestry of life's experiences, and I consider myself very fortunate.
Yeah, so we're kind of heading down the final stretch. These have been great questions. So reminder to post some questions if you have them while we've got time with Chuck. I thought as kind of we head to the fourth quarter, if you will, of the webinar. Maybe some fun questions. What's the best part of your job? It just sounds like listening to you talk and just knowing you and the enthusiasm and the passion you have. You've got to have a lot of fun waking up in the morning. What can you tell us about, what kind of gets that heart pounding and gets you excited?
People. This business is all about people, and whether it's people that are fortunate enough to be able to call a colleague, or some of the interesting people in the industry I've met along the way, it's just been fun. Again, growing up loving sports and being able to meet and hang out with some of the guys that I admired from a distance, and some of the experiences we've been able to have, the people are what make it worthwhile. And every day, at every opportunity in this business, you get to meet really interesting people. And as far as the minor league baseball angle, and this was true with the Rangers as well, the opportunity to have a positive impact on people's lives is deeply meaningful to me. And it may sound kind of corny, it may sound like a line, but it isn't. It's for real. And I could give you examples for hours and hours about the things that, as an organization in different locations, we've been able to do that really contributed to the quality of people's life, and they benefited the community. And whether that's been any number of different things that we've done in Myrtle Beach or Altoona back in the day when we first got started there, or State College, or with the Rangers. To be a part of a situation where we got involved with a franchise that for 39 years had not had a lot of success, and to buy in at the perfect time where the great work that had been taking place in the baseball department was percolating to the surface, and to be able to take a situation where the sense of trust between the fans and the franchise and ownership had been badly damaged, and to be able to restore that with a series of steps that were the same kind of things that we've done for years at the minor league level, and to see it succeed in the fourth biggest market in the country, and attendance to rebound, and fan affinity just bounced to levels that had never been experienced before. Those are all really rewarding experiences, but it all starts with people, and it all starts with being committed, doing the right thing, and trying to take care of people. And if you do that, I've always thought that answers about 90% of life's questions and challenges, and we tried to do that everywhere. That we tried to have that be our culture, and whatever franchise I've been involved with, and I'm really proud of the job that our staffs do in every location every day to make that happen.
Yeah, one of the things the students obviously talk a lot about, is what's it like to actually sit in the chair, and you hear about the burnout factor too. So Eric has a real simple question. And I think we know the answer just seeing your enthusiasm, but after all these years, do you still enjoy it?
Yeah, I love it. I really do. Don't get me wrong. There are days or or meetings or moments or stretches where you just want to kick yourself sometimes. But I really do enjoy it, and the ups are so much higher and more sustained and more frequent than the downs. But it is a business. There's a lot of adrenaline. And there are a lot of good things, but you got to work through challenges too. I'll give you an example. In baseball, particularly minor league baseball, Mother Nature is an ally that we always have to regard quite warily. And opening day last year in Myrtle Beach, we got rained out. And opening day in minor league baseball, that's a big day. That's one of the biggest revenue days of the year. We got rained out, so it's like starting the season already in a hole financially. And for years I've said, if you don't want to take the chance of being in a business with weather risk, then go buy a bowling alley. But I like bowling, but I really love baseball, so I like being in baseball. But there are many nights, when you're sitting around a baseball and you think, bowling, that might be interesting.
Yeah.
And last year opening day was one of those, and then the weather was really bad the first 2 months of the year, but we just kept plugging away, and ended up having a really nice season. It was a credit to the job that the staff did. But no, being in the sports industry, and this is a fitting analogy since we're at Disney right now, but I've always said it's kind of like Space Mountain. It's a roller coaster in the dark. It really isn't all that rough, and the ups and downs aren't all that challenging. But it's like a roller coaster in the dark because you don't always see what's coming. But if you just kind of accept the fact there's going to be ups and downs, you can't always predict what's going to be there. But overall, you're going to enjoy the experience. Then it's like the way I am when I get off Space Mountain. I can't wait to go on again. That's the way I feel about every season and every challenge that we face in the sports industry and the various contexts in which I've worked in.
Yeah, so you keep innovating. I mean, that's the fun thing. It's like anything's possible. And appropriate question from Noah. He said, with your experience working with Penn State and most recently West Virginia, getting involved in minor league baseball, is this a trend? That you think the marriage? I mean, it's real creative. Maybe give some context to how universities and your teams are working together from a business standpoint.
Sure. Well, I bought Altoona in 2002, and like a lot of deals, the closing got delayed a little bit, took longer than expected. And in early March, we had a meeting set up for April 2nd with some officials from Penn State. I didn't even know what they wanted to meet about. And lo and behold, it turns out that the deal to acquire Altoona didn't close until the wee hours of the morning, just after April Fool's Day had ended. So on a short night's sleep, I drove from where I lived at that time in Pittsburgh up to Altoona, and the very first meeting that I had owning the Altoona Curve was with the folks from Penn State, who proposed building a ballpark together, having it on the Penn State campus, having me purchase and relocate a minor league team to play there and for us to run it, and for the facility to be shared by the university's intercollegiate baseball team as well as the minor league team. And I remember I had this big keychain that had about 50 keys on it that had just been handed a few hours earlier, and I remember saying, well, that's a really interesting idea, but we have a game in 2 days, and right now we don't know what key opens up the men's room, so how about we figure that out and I'll get back to you. So took a little while to get to it, but ultimately over the course of the next 4 years we put that deal together, and it's worked out exceptionally well. At the time when that ballpark opened in 2006, there was a lot of talk that would touch off a trend, and it didn't happen. There are a few reasons for it. One, the economic downturn that kicked in a couple of years later basically froze a lot of construction projects. But the second thing is that what makes it work particularly well for us in State College is because we're a short season team. In minor league baseball, you've got 6 different classifications. You've got AAA, AA, high A, low A, short season A, and rookie ball. Well, from low A, high A, AA, AAA, those are full season teams. They basically start at the same time as Major League Baseball, and they end around Labor Day. But short season leagues begin after the June draft, so they begin about the 3rd week of June. Well, the short season leagues are a much better fit for a shared facility with the university team because you have all kinds of scheduling overlaps otherwise. And so there aren't as many instances where it would be a good fit as one might think. But now we're seeing in Morgantown, West Virginia, that Oliver Luck, the athletic director at WVU, had great foresight to try to get a new ballpark built there with the intention of it being shared by a New York Penn League team, and the New York Penn League team supports that concept. So I think there'll be a second example of that within the next 12 to 24 months, and hopefully others. So they very well been able to have a facility of a quality that we wouldn't have been able to enjoy had we been on our own. There's substantial cost savings as well, and it's just been a real success for all of us. And I think there are more instances where that can work as long as one is realistic about the need to hopefully have a setting where a professional and a collegiate team can coexist without an undue number of conflicts.
Yeah, I think back to what you said, and I think the lesson there is problem solver too. You said that earlier. That's a perfect 1 + 1 = 3 scenario, that you've got a university that wants a world-class facility that has a certain time frame, and be able to think creatively.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and to give you a good example of how we worked on a level, when the ballpark was being designed, the university was talking about the coaches' offices for the Penn State coaches being downstairs in the clubhouse level underground. And I said, well, look, there's one design criteria with this ballpark. It has to look out on Mount Nittany, because the folks in that part of the country, they get all misty-eyed thinking about Mount Nittany, and I want to make sure that every single seat was looking out at Mount Nittany. I said, hey, this is crazy. We got a suite level anyway. Just extend the suite level, put the coaches' offices there, and then they'll have this 300, almost 360-degree view of Mount Nittany. What a recruiting advantage that would be. And so that was an example where I was thinking about what was good for the university. Conversely, The university does not allow beer or alcohol to be sold at any of its sporting events, but they agreed that it was okay to sell it at our minor league games on campus. So I was looking out what was good for them.
Mm-hmm.
They were open-minded about the things that we needed. We ended up with a great partnership.
Yeah, good. Also, your earlier comments of listening,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it through the other perspective. So, I think I'll end with a real, fun question. A lot, just like an athlete, right? You aspire to, I want to win a World Series, that champagne moment. For you, like, what's been that one champagne moment? Like, how did I get here? This is so fun. Is there that one, and especially for the students at Northwestern, when you think about aspiring to that champagne moment in their own life, give us some perspective into what that would be for you, and maybe some aspirational, focus for them in their sports business careers.
I've been awfully fortunate, personally and professionally, and obviously, the family comes first. So I'm going to take this question just in terms of the professional part of it. But in the '80s, there was a band called the Talking Heads, and they had a song called "Once in a Lifetime." And in the video, the lead singer David Byrne was like pounding his forehead, going, "How did I get here?" And I've had a lot of those moments, fortunately. But I think none greater than in 2010. We just bought the Rangers in August. And there we are in 2010. We're playing the Yankees. I mean, the epitome of what everyone aspires to be or to defeat in professional sports. And we're playing the Yankees at home, and we're in the decisive game, and we're leading in the ninth inning. And Alex Rodriguez is up, and Neftali Feliz is on the mound. He throws a slider with 2 strikes. He freezes A-Rod. We win the American League Championship, and 5 minutes later, I'm on a podium in the infield and being handed the American League Championship trophy. And then I go in and Vladimir Guerrero is pouring champagne over my head, and I'm just thinking, like, how in the world did I ever get to be here? And it was just an amazing moment. It's one of those things that you savor. And before Neftali threw that last pitch, everyone kind of sensed that next pitch was probably going to end it. And I remember I wanted to just take a moment, and I just looked up all around the stadium. It was packed with over 50,000 fans who were experiencing something they'd never experienced before. The Rangers had never won a postseason series, let alone an American League pennant. And I kind of looked all around 360 degrees and just took it all in. I wanted to form a mental snapshot of that moment that I was going to be able to come back to at any time in my life. And the memory of that moment is something that's very, very clear to me, and savored it all. So, again, I mean, I've been fortunate. I've had enough high moments that if everything I've had is as good as it's ever going to be, I would consider myself way, way ahead. But the fun of this is that at every phase of my life, if someone would have told me what the next 5 years were going to be, I would have said, that sounds crazy. I don't see how that's going to happen. And yet, each chapter seems to be more interesting, and it keeps surprising me, and hopefully there's a few more good surprises in there in the future.
Yeah, so I said that was the last question, but one extra point with that. I mean, that's a great point. Like, for the students or young professionals first starting out, imagining them, winning an American League Championship trophy. That could, obviously take decades in that case, and make those right decisions. But you said something really interesting that I want to ask you about before we close. Those 5-year chapters. I mean, is that a realistic and goal setting to look at it through that way, or what kind of guidance as you look back, how you look at it and how you would kind of plan it for your own personal goals?
I never looked at things in a real in that formal fashion. When I first got out of school, we got out of law school. My family and I would all go on vacation to the same place every year. And the last night, it happened to be at the beach. And the last night, I would always look out at the ocean, kind of standing on the same spot, looking out at the same spot. And I would think a little bit about what had happened in the year that just passed, and I would wonder what was going to happen in the year to come. That's probably as close as I've ever come to looking at things in that way. But it has been fun to think about all the things that have happened that there'd have been no way to anticipate. And again, that's why I analogize it to being like a roller coaster in the dark. You're never quite sure whether the next dip or turn is going to be, but there's going to be one. And if you just have a good attitude about it, and you just keep plugging away, and you believe in yourself, you believe that opportunities can come, and you don't edit yourself strictly on the basis of what you're willing to bet heavily is going to come. You bet on yourself, and then you just kind of hope for good things to follow. If you put yourself in a position to succeed, you're probably going to look back and say, gosh, I never would have anticipated this would have happened, but you'll be real glad that it did.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in closing, I mean, that's great advice. I love the roller coaster in the dark. I mean, obviously, you know, whether you're a student just starting out, you've been working, you know, maybe for 6 years or so, you know, and looking to take the next step, but you've been a little afraid. I mean, that's part of what everybody, I think, in this industry has gone through. So, thank you, Chuck. I think you've created a lot of problem solvers, you know, out there, and you know, to the Northwestern community. I'm sure we'll be seeing many of you here at the winter meetings, and you know, let's give Chuck, if there is such a thing, of a big virtual webinar applause as we officially sign off, you know, here from Orlando at the baseball winter meetings. And thank you again to Northwestern and the MSA program for hosting us today. I know Chuck's a busy guy, got a lot of stuff to do, but thank you very much for taking the time and joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dan. And thank you, and good luck to everybody.